Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this next webinar by the EdTech Demonstrator School Consortium. As all of you seem to have done, thank you for turning off your video and putting your microphones to mute as well. As we go through the presentation, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. However, should you need to ask a question as you go through, so you don't forget, if you can post it into the conversation pane at the right hand side. Sometimes we do know that people have issues accessing this, so if you can't get to it, don't worry, there will be a chance at the end to ask questions, so don't worry about that. Today's webinar is going to look at how we ensure that learners are kept safe whilst accessing the remote content and during remote learning. So we're going to take you through things to consider, but also give you some ideas about how to do it on the two main platforms of G Suite and Microsoft Teams Office 365. So thank you very much for joining us. And just to start off with, just give you a little overview of the consortium and how we're made up. So the EdTech Demonstrator Consortium is made up of 3 schools. That's Ribblesdale High School, Hambleton Primary, and Highfurlong Special School in Blackpool. And it's a very diverse makeup, as you can tell from the names, and we cover all the phases as well, so we can offer support in all the different areas, right through to specialist SEND support as well, and using EdTech to support that. We're well equipped in terms of giving that real life view about how it can be used across the organisation, and we do appreciate that everyone's at a different stage. So wherever you're at, we will be able to provide the support, and if we can't, then we will be able to draw on the knowledge of another EdTech demonstrator to support that process. So that's about us. As I said, what we can offer, it's about harnessing what you already have and using it for remote, and then as we move into hybrid working, but also the longer term view of how we're going to use technology when we return back to that normal way of working, I think that we all crave. And it's as today's webinar is about, it's about keeping those young people safe whilst using remote technologies. And I think ultimately it's about maintaining that support in terms of well-being for our young people, but also the staff as well, and to ensure that we're getting the very best pastoral support we can, particularly whilst we finish off this period of remote learning. And longer term, probably at the moment, particularly given that the DfE just reissued the next set of guidance, is probably not on our radars fully yet, but it's that EdTech strategy for the longer term. What's it going to look like in your organisation over the next 12 to 18, 24 months or so? So that's a bit about us, and feel free after this webinar to reach out to us, and we can point in the direction of how you can get that additional support. So ultimately, it's safeguarding at the core, isn't it? Safeguarding is fundamental to everything we do in education, and that hasn't changed whilst we are remote working and remote learning. And I think we've got to keep that at the forefront of our minds when we go through the decision-making process about how EdTech is going to support the learning journey for our young people. There are essentially two types of home learning that are taking place at the moment, and I would think that most of us have certainly done the first one, which is that sort of asynchronous learning where learners can work in their own time at their own pace, and it fits in with what's going on at home in terms of their circumstances. And I think the thing that's become more prevalent, particularly over the past month or so, is that sort of the second one on there, which is that live online learning with multiple people in there, and it's synchronous. So it's happening live essentially. And I think that's the one that's creating a lot of interest at the moment, but from a safeguarding and keeping children safe perspective, is probably the most challenging one to deal with, because if we are doing it in an asynchronous fashion, if it's pre-recorded content or through conversation on whatever platform, then that's a little bit easier to manage than if we are going live and we are doing a live lesson or a live lecture style. So I think it's even more important now that a lot of people are looking at doing this or trying to refine what they're doing in terms of that live lesson synchronous learning. So we've absolutely got to consider what's going on from a sort of keeping children safe perspective. The thing I want to stress though, it's nothing new. So what we are doing, it's about, safeguarding is at the heart of everything we do, as I said, and it takes, as we all aware, it takes precedence over all the other decision making processes, and it needs to do that. And the online digital platform is an extension of our physical school and our physical classrooms. You should be following the safeguarding policies and procedures that you have in place, and all safeguarding issues should be dealt with in the same way, using the same platforms that you use and the existing procedures you have for reporting those incidents. They should all be made through that normal process. We've been asked a lot as an EdTech consortium, could you share your remote learning policy and things like that? But we don't have those policies. It's an integral part of our existing policies. So it's an integral part of the behaviour management policies, the safeguarding policies, the acceptable use policies. And I think absolutely you need to review those and make sure they cover the activities that you're potentially looking at doing online in terms of online learning, but you do not need standalone policies to what you've already got. We are extending the physical school into the virtual world, and make sure that they reflect what you are doing on a day-to-day basis as it is now. So how are you going to monitor the delivery of those live lessons, and how are you going to pick up any issues that may come about? And as I've said, it's very much about using the existing processes around safeguarding concerns. So like us, we use CPOMs. If there's a safeguarding concern, wherever that may be, whether it's that's during remote learning or on-site learning, it's recorded and referenced and dealt with through the normal processes. It is nothing new to what we've already done. And I think this is the key thing to remember, is that it is covered under the existing policies that, might need a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of changing to encompass it, but it is absolutely what we've always done and always will continue to do. So let's take the bull by the horns and go straight for that synchronous remote learning. And that, I put it in that title because it covers things like not only live lessons, but also live communications and chats that are going on. I think governing bodies, heads and the staff must have that full regard to safeguarding guidance when we're going about this. Any changes that are made need to be shared with staff and make sure they're comfortable with what's happening. Obviously ensure that the learners have the right access to the platforms before you embark on this, the right level of permissions. And I know that Michael and Lee are going to go through that from a G Suite and Teams perspective later on in this webinar. And that's absolutely right, that make sure the access for those learners is there and it's an appropriate level. And the next bullet point is an interesting one about having an adult in the room with the student during the live streaming. I think this particularly applies to primary age students. I think it becomes more unrealistic with secondary, but there are other mitigating things we can put in place regarding those things to keep the children and the staff safe in terms of their online delivery. I think the practical things also need to be considered. So what's going on, the background, the distractions, are you going to use blurred background like I am today in terms of where the young person is? Are we going to insist on that they work in a particular area of the house? And I know a lot of people say, well, exclude the bedroom, but that's where most young people work. And I think the key thing is to agree all these expectations in advance of going anywhere near this synchronous or online live lesson learning, because that needs to be shared and made absolutely clear to the students, but also to the parents as well. What do we expect from them? What is their part to play within this? Because we share that when we're in a sort of a school setting in a physical classroom. So we also need to share that now and make it absolutely clear in terms of your expectations of school when you are delivering this sort of synchronous live lesson type learning. And then there are other things about sort of professional conduct, dress code, and that's not just for staff, but obviously students as well, background noise, particularly if you're presenting, length of session. Now, this is quite an interesting one. I know a lot of schools have pushed ahead and tried to mimic the timetable in terms of live lessons and done an hour for every lesson that would normally be on the timetable. Our experience at Ribblesdale is telling us that probably for a live lesson, 20 minutes to half an hour maximum is about the optimum. Beyond that, it doesn't have the same impact. And maybe you're particularly using them for sort of a pastoral check-in, but also using them to introduce new topics from an academic perspective. And I think in terms of before you go for a live synchronous lesson, is it more practical and to do an asynchronous session, i.e. a pre-recorded session for that activity? We've used a lot of that at Ribblesdale, and I know that Hambleton have as well. And is that going to be the better solution for you rather than going for a synchronous live lesson? And there is quite a bit of pressure at the moment from parents and from certain people within the education space about that live lessons are a must. Well, actually, it's just another tool for us to deliver. And if you've got an adequate digital platform that you can do quality delivery in terms of learning activities, maybe using things like Centritech or LBQ to support that assessment process, then the question is, what is the purpose of that live synchronous lesson? So it's just something to bear in mind as we're going through it. But ultimately, the normal policies you have, maybe tweaked and extended a little bit, apply to everything we're doing to keep our young people safe. So that's all I want to say, and you've listened to me enough now for the past sort of 10 minutes. I want to get right into the main body of this, is where we're going to take you through how Ribblesdale and Hambleton are both using completely different digital platforms and the things they've considered whilst they're doing this. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Michael, who's the Year 5 teacher and digital lead at Hambleton, who's going to take you through how they've kept children safe using G Suite as that platform and investigating things like the settings and the procedures they've used. So over to you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. As Paul said, my name is Michael Goldie. I'm a Year 5 teacher at Hambleton Primary Academy, and I'm also the EdTech lead here as well. Next slide, please. So first of all, I am going to give you a perspective of using G Suite and safeguarding and putting them together to try and give you a bit of an idea about how Google can be effective when safeguarding with children. First of all, you need to do things like decide what school channels you will use to communicate with parents and other people as well. You need to really consider maybe how you are going to use that channel, maybe through Google Classroom, maybe setting up separate emails from the students, from the teachers' emails in general. So at our school, we will use, instead of the teacher's email, they'll use a Year 1 teacher at Hambleton Primary Academy email. Also, it's really important, this is common sense, but it's very important that if you're communicating with parents, make sure you don't use your Facebook account or any Twitter accounts. It's best to keep things quite professional and within the actual school context. Next one, who can see my Google Drive documents? Well, if you have Open Drive documents, that means they're not linked to your Google Educational Suite. Anyone can actually access those Google Drive documents just given a link. So if you do have names of children or addresses within there, anyone can access them. So you do need to be very careful. However, if you're using Google Drive as part of the G Suite for Education, you don't need to worry about this. Your school's default Google Drive will only be visible to users in your school. What decisions will be made about setting work and communicating? Well, once you start to set up your Google Classroom, you need to decide what privileges and functionalities you will set for your children back of house. This is something I will discuss further when I do a live demonstration. You may need to decide whether you'll allow those pupils to post comments on their own or only post comments based on what the teacher has put themselves. I'll show you what we've put in place at our school and maybe what you can decide for yourselves as well. And then this is quite a big one. Will you let your children chat in the Google Meet app? Currently, we have turned off that functionality for our children. We're in the process of putting something in place so that we can use that functionality with children for different types of lessons. But at the moment, we don't use this. However, I will give you a live demonstration how to set that up and how to set that up safely within the remote learning context. Next, this is something we do at the moment, which is live streaming lessons. So it's a Google Meet session, but it's set up through live streaming with a view only process set up for it. That means anyone who comes in doesn't have their camera on, can't have their microphone on, and they can only see the live stream. That's what we do at the moment, and it does work quite successfully. And then finally, will you be sharing your videos through YouTube? A lot of schools do this. Our Google Classroom account is linked to the YouTube account, and we tend to do a lot of praise and encouragement, star of the weeks, etc., and we upload them on our YouTube account. However, in doing so, we make sure the settings are all private, and then they can only be accessed through the students' accounts. That's quite important. So when you do upload onto YouTube, you just make that as a private video that can only be accessed within your institution. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a Google Suite Live demo now, and I've got some bullet points together here about things that I'm going to go through. So firstly, I'll be starting with an example of a consent form for your parents. Then I'm going to move on to setting the correct privileges in your Google Classroom, toggling that Google Meet on or off for your users, and then using Google Meet safely, and then using the Google Meet live stream safely as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take over control, and I'm going to show you my screen, and I'm going to give you a live demonstration. I'm hoping at this point you should be able to see my screen, and the first thing I'm going to show you is a consent form which will be sent out to parents just to get that consent for Google Meet. So as you can see, this is set up through Google Forms. Very simple to do. You can, if you just Google Forms, go in there, and each of these are separate questions. What we tend to do is we put a bit of a blurb at the front about what we expect of the children, what the Google Meet will entail. And then here, this gives them the option to opt out, or yes, you want your children to have access to the Meets and Google Hangouts, etc. We find out what the child's name is, what year group they're in, and just this is a short signature from the parents at the bottom. This enables you to get like a live signature from them. We don't have to send out any forms, and we send this through Google Classroom. This will then collate all our responses, and then we can then set up and decide which children have had consent to go on Google Meet and who haven't. That is going to be our first point of process when setting up our Google Meet meetings and lessons with our students. Next, I'm going to go into the privileges within a Google Classroom so you can see how I've set it up for my school. So hopefully you can see my Google Classroom here. This is my Year 5 classroom. Now, if you have come on to any of my other live demonstrations, you'll know at the side here, if you click down, you'll have all of your classrooms set up here. I'm a Year 5 teacher, so I'll be setting up my Year 5 classroom. Once you're in here, if you go up to the cog, the settings bar at the top here, you click in here, you will have all the class settings. Down here, if you go to General, you will see there is the stream. Now on the stream, up the top here, if I just come out of my settings again, when you go in your classroom, your stream is here. It's like Facebook. You click in here, you type something, and you post what you want in there. Now, if I go back to my settings, the settings I've set for my stream is students can only comment. What I mean by that is that when I click out of here again, when I go on my stream, if I post something, students can only comment on posts I have made. I don't want students making their own posts, which can cause problems within that. So I can keep an eye on what has been posted there. Next, going back to the settings here, you also have this option for show deleted items. Only teachers can view deleted items. You can toggle this on or off. It's not really a safeguarding concern at the moment, this. And then you've got your guardian summaries. Now, within your class settings, when you're in people, which is your class, you can invite your guardians. We have decided as an academy not to invite guardians because we feel like the parents can see and oversee it at home anyway. If you do wish to do that, you can invite guardians, and within there is a setting which gives out guardian summaries about what they have been saying, or what it also gives feedback to the parents about what their children have been commenting on, so it keeps them in the loop as well. Quite handy. Now you've got this Google Meet part down here. I'm going to show you further how to switch this on and off within the admin functionality. But at the moment, we have this switched off. What does this mean? Well, at the moment, it's switched off. It's not visible to students. So if I turn this on and I click save, what will then happen is if I go back into my Year 5 classroom here, you will see this meeting link comes up here. What this enables me to do is I click on the link and all the students can also come in on the link at the same time, and I can create a class or a Google Meet at the same time. The beauty of this is that if I am not, as a teacher, it recognises me because I'm on my teacher account, as you can see there, M for Mr. Goldie. If I am not in the Google meeting and the children try and click on that link, they will not be allowed access without me being in there. And it's really handy that, so the children can't meet up on their own in there. But for the meantime, we have that switched off. But I'm just going to keep it on for this. So there are your settings, really. They're quite simple, but they just give you an idea about how we've got ours set up. Next, I'm going to look at actual Google Meet itself. Now, if I go into the admin console, which if you have Google Educational Suite, there'll be someone in your school who has the admin settings. In here, you have all of your functionalities. If I click into my apps, okay, and within my apps, if I click in G Suite, it takes a while to load sometimes. Once I'm in G Suite, what I'll do is it will list up, as you can see, all the different apps and the access they can have. So here you've got Google Meet. I've just turned it on at this moment because I'm going to show you how to set up a live stream in a minute. But you can toggle this on and off. And that means even if children, when they are logged into their accounts on any device, they try and set up a Google Meet, they will not be allowed to. It will say it has been disabled for users within this institution. At the moment, it's on for everyone. You can you can also diversify this, and when you set this up through the functionality in Google where you have teachers set up and also students set up, which I'll do a recorded one later on about that, you can toggle it on and off, on for a few, so you can just have it on for teachers and not on for students. But for this case, I'm going to have it on for everyone. Now, this is the beauty of what I'm going to show you now is Google live streams. I'm going to set up a live stream from my calendar so you can see what and how you can set up a live stream and exactly what a live stream is. So let's just say you decided for your children that you want to do a maths meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. You click on it and you open it up, and here are all your details. So I'll put in here maths meeting. Now, you've got this option here. It says add Google Meet video conferencing. I want to add the Google Meet conference in there. And once you've got it, this now has created a link to a Google Meet. Now, if you click on this button down here, it says add a live stream. Click on add live stream. You have the live stream, and here is the link for it here, which you can save the link as. I'll show you a bit more about that in a minute. And then I'm going to click on save. Once this is saved, you have the maths meeting here. Now, currently, that will go live. The children can get into that from the link easily. But what you also want to do is double click back into it, and you have this more actions tab at the top here. By clicking on more actions, you can turn this into a create a view only event. By doing that, this means that the children can now click into the live stream, but all they can see is the teacher talking. Their camera will not work, the microphone will not work. It will just be a live stream. So then you can then pre-record or save that. I'm going to show you an example about how I'd show that to children and get that ready for them. So as you see, there is my link. If I click on this is copying your stream link. I'm going to save this. And now I may wish to go back into Year 5 and share something with the class. And I'll put here is the link for your maths tomorrow. Underneath it, paste the link in, and then it's done. I'm not going to post that because I'll have all students trying to get in on that. And then finally, just to go back onto the YouTube thing, I think it's really important that if you are uploading any YouTube content, just make sure you set it just for people to be able to access it within your institution. Now, that is a very much the basics of safeguarding when using Google when using Google Classroom and using the Google Educational Suite. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you back to Paul, who will then introduce Lee. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. A brief overview into how you can keep your children safe in terms of the settings for live lessons within G Suite. I'm now going to hand you over to Lee Small, who's going to do a similar thing, but from a Microsoft Teams perspective and how it's been used at Ribblesdale. So over to you, Lee. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. So thank you very much for joining us today. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so first of all, we're looking at how we keep our pupils safe when they are using Microsoft Teams. So the very first thing that you've got to understand is obviously that Ribblesdale is quite a big school. So a lot of our policies and our management of the system is done at the high level as an admin level, because one of the most important things when you're bringing in a policy is to ensure that it's consistent throughout. Okay, and to ensure that something is consistent throughout, what Ribblesdale do is we create different policies to ensure that these are applied to all of our pupils and all of our staff and affect everybody in the same way. So to just give you a couple of ideas, okay, so within our admin suite of Microsoft Teams, we've created a custom policy. You can now see this on the right hand side. So this is actually a screenshot from our school, and the way that we've done that is when you first have or open up Microsoft Teams, there are custom policies already, or student policies should I say, already in the background. But what they are is they are basically turning everything off for every pupil. Now every single school wants something slightly different. Okay, so what we did is we edited that Microsoft default policy, and very similar to Michael, okay, and Hambleton, we decided to turn off the likes of chat, so pupils cannot chat through with themselves through the platform, but we also decided to take that pupils would not be allowed to edit or delete posts as well. So they are allowed to post onto Microsoft Teams, but they are not allowed to edit or delete that post. Now, the reasoning behind that is we wanted to enforce think before you post. So what we didn't want is a student to be able to post something, I don't know, then automatically think, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or and then they went back and changed it. So we basically made sure that all pupils know when something's posted there, the only person who can change or delete that would be the teacher, which means that they are obviously brought to that attention. Now, just to give you a couple of things about setting these policies. So within the message policies, these are basically done at the high level by our admin and by our technical team. Now, when you create that policy, one of the first things that you need to be aware of is that that policy needs to be applied individually to every single pupil if you do that in the admin portal. So if you set up a policy and you have 1,500 pupils within your school, you would individually have to set this up, okay, for every single one of those students. Okay, now that obviously is not ideal. So at Ribblesdale, what we do is we use something called PowerShell, and our technicians write a script within PowerShell, and that can apply that same policy to all pupils in a very, very quick manner. And the next thing that we need to remember is unfortunately, when we apply a policy or make a change, it doesn't happen instantly. It can take up to 24 to 48 hours to actually apply. That's because at Ribblesdale, we have a one-to-one scheme, and it's got to affect quite a lot of different devices as well. Another thing that we've then done is we've also set meeting policies. So very similar to our messaging policies, we've set meeting policies up. Now, meeting policies for us are quite easy. We do not allow pupils to schedule or start meetings whatsoever. And the only thing that our pupils are allowed to do within a Teams meeting like this is they have the ability to share a PowerPoint. And we wanted them to do that because that's a way that they can showcase their work and that the teachers can share the work that they've got. And what we can do is when they're sharing their work, we can also request that we can take control, so we can show and point different things out as well. And that works extremely well for us. So at the very top level, these are kind of our main policies that we have within Ribblesdale High School. Now, moving on, as well as Microsoft Teams, because we're a one-to-one school, we have to ensure that safeguarding is done, obviously, within school as well as the pupils are at home. Okay, so we use two different other essential pieces of software. The first one that we use is Microsoft Intune. Now, this is basically a mobile device management system, and it allows us to control the students' devices and manage their devices when they are in or off site. Now, a couple of things about this software is it is free. If you get the A3 Microsoft licenses, and that is something where you can then manage your devices at a high level. So just to give you an idea, you can basically turn on pupils' devices, you can stop them accessing different things, and that's just something that Intune does. But it also allows us to push out new pieces of software that can that we feel are essential on all students' computers. So, for example, if I wanted Python as a computer science teacher on all of our pupils' devices, that is something that we could push out at a top level. But once again, there's a delay in it. It doesn't happen instantly, and that delay is normally around about 8 hours. And another piece of software which we use and is absolutely essential for our one-to-one scheme is called Impero. Now, basically, this is used for blocking different applications, but also in a safeguarding way, logs keystrokes and different websites and things that pupils do when they are within school. But when they are outside of school, those rules are all relaxed. In a conversation with parents, where we're through the school, we have a conversation with parents and we agree on the policies and things that we have. But just to tell you, give you an example of how Impero works, the idea is that pupils are local admins on their device. So what they can do is they can do certain things on that device when they get home, but there are certain things that as a school we don't want them to be able to access. So for example, they would not be able to access command prompt. So as soon as they type in the command prompt, it would block that from happening on the student's device. Installing or uninstalling pieces of software, they can get to that platform, but they can uninstall their own software. But as soon as they try to uninstall an essential piece of software that we use as a school, it will block the students from doing that and simply say that this is not allowed. And as a school, we use all of these different pieces of software together to create an effective one-to-one and safe learning environment for our pupils. Now, as we move on, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you a live demonstration. Now, one of the important things at the moment is live lessons. So I'm going to explain basically step by step how we do this within Ribblesdale and the procedures that we take when we're doing this. So I'm just going to currently share my screen. Okay, and if you bear with me, I'm just going to minimize this. So at the moment, you should be able to see my screen, and I'm just going to go into my test team, which is just here. Now, the very first thing that we don't do, or to note that we don't do within Microsoft Teams, is we currently do not schedule live lessons. And the reason why we do not schedule live lessons, okay, which what I mean by that is put them into students' calendars, is because students can actually press the join button at any time, and they can potentially be within that platform having a conversation without anybody there. Now, the first thing that I would say about that is I do know that Microsoft have just recently released a new policy that will stop that from happening. Now, the problem is it can take quite a while to get down to different schools, and when it affects your tenancy, it might actually be live now. For us, I know that currently isn't live, so we currently still use this kind of way of doing it. But when that does come live, that means that the teacher will need to let them in. They will basically sit into a lobby until the teacher lets them in. So at this moment in time, this is the process that we do as a school to hold live lessons. The very first thing is we advertise it by using a notification. So we will give pupils a notice of maybe a week or a couple of days to say that a live lesson will happen, and we will say the time and the date that will actually occur. And we give them a little bit of information, just saying, please will they attend, and then below we have basically a pre-register. Now we do this one of two ways. Okay, we can do it using a poll. Okay, now to access the poll in Microsoft Teams, it's extremely easy. We just do the @ and type in forms, and that will allow you to create a form, or you can do @poll and that will also do it as well. Okay, and what that does is then that just allows you to create a little poll. So simply I could say, yes, I'm going to attend it, and I submit. And what that will do is that will give me a pre-register of the students who are intending to be there during the live lesson. Another way that you can do it is we can simply just like. Okay, now if you do want to do that like section, I would also just put it into a little message here asking pupils to like it. The only reason why I've done this in the past is because I can then export this data and I can have an Excel document, and I've also got, you know, I can cross-check little bits and pieces. Okay, so once we've done that, when it actually arrives at the time, we use the Meet Now button. So the teacher would be in their team that they've advertised their live lesson, and they would use this Meet Now button, which is just down here. Okay, now unfortunately this will not work at this moment in time, only because I'm already on a live call. So all that happens is you press that button, and a screen pops up, and you press the button that says Meet Now. And then all that does is that starts a meeting like we are currently sat in at this moment in time. Okay, so bear with me if I just a meeting that we're currently sat at this moment in time. So very much, okay, if I can get back to it, bear with me. I'm just going to, okay, so very much like this, okay, which is the meeting that we'd be in. Now the first thing is I would now advise to have two things. The first thing is a holding message like we do when you arrive here at the start of these events, just to give students a couple of reminders. So for example, make sure that your cameras are off, make sure that your mics are off, and then normally we would have a simple line to just simply say, please remember normal behavior policies still apply. And then I would straight away record. Okay, so we always record our meetings. Now obviously we're recording currently, but if we record the meeting, and that's just to ensure that basically you know, we're following the correct procedures, but whatever goes on in that lesson, pupils are able to refer back to it later on, and you do have the ability to reference that if and when needed. Now, the important thing about recording a session within Microsoft Teams is that it actually automatically saves to Stream, which is part of that Office 365 package. Now, the important thing with Stream is basically it's ring-fenced within the Office 365, so you can't access it, and you can't access it unless you are in the organisation. And as for example, if I wanted to allow anybody else to have to access it, I would need to go into that settings to be able to change it. And what's important about that is because it's currently being hosted by the Microsoft, okay, it is currently hosted in a UK data center, which basically means that, you know, we're quite secure that it all follows the GDPR, and that we've got to make sure that we currently do that. And that's just something which is quite important. Now, obviously, you're now teaching your lesson and pupils will be entering that lesson, okay? So what we can do is we come over here and we can show the participants, okay? And you will see quite a lot of your names probably popping up right now, okay, just here. So there are a couple of things that I've noticed when you're trying to manage a live lesson. The first thing is, as much as you say and you put on the screen, can you please mute your mic, and can you make sure your camera is turned off? Sometimes sometimes pupils will often forget to do that. Okay, so you can simply press the mute now, mute all button, and the only person that has access to that is the attendee, or sorry, the presenter. So because I've started that meeting, I can mute anybody that comes in, and sometimes you might notice some of you might forget to turn off your mics, and that's myself there just muting everybody to make sure that there's no distractions there. But once again, that also comes in terms for pupils who might forget to put on their might forget to put the mute on, or are performing a little bit of distractions. Okay, another section that I would consider is if you ever do have a student on a live lesson who is not conforming to the expectations of your live lesson, is you can kick them out. So let's say, for example, okay, let's say Erica, okay, who's currently within this presentation is not conforming. Okay, I can remove that participant from the call by simply selecting remove participant, and that will put out take that participant or that attendee from this call. And that's just something that I can do there. Okay, and once again, that's just quite a nice little handy management tool that you would need to make sure is that you've got at your disposal. Another thing that I would consider is backgrounds. Okay, backgrounds are quite important, especially when we're working at home as well. Okay, so we need to make sure that our backgrounds are either blurry or a different background. And to do that, once again, we can press our three little dots here, and you will see show background effects. And when we've gone there, okay, you'll see that we have all the different ones, and we can go up and down and choose whichever one we might prefer. So I think, at this time, most of us might prefer to be on a beach, so we can press and we can apply, and that then puts you in a nice, safe environment, knowing that you don't have to be concerned about what's around you as well. And that's also, quite an important thing, that when you're presenting, to make sure that you are aware of what's happening and what's around you within that background there. And I suppose, I suppose that now that once you've, these are constant things that you would have to do is managing your class or your live lesson. Now, one of the important things is when you come to an end. Okay, so when your live lesson is finished, it is extremely tempting to press the red hang up button. And I've done it a couple of times myself. Okay, now the problem with that hang up button, what that means is that you leave the call. Okay, it does still mean that the call is still happening. So as a teacher, if I have 30 pupils within a live call and then I press this button, which means hang up, that means I've left that platform or that room, but those 30 students are still in there, and then they can still talk and have a conversation. Okay, so we need to be very careful on how we actually end the call. So we do two steps. The first step that we do is we basically end the meeting. Now, ending the meeting simply kicks everybody out. So as a teacher, I'd press end meeting, I would leave the meeting, and it also closes the room, so no pupils or no members of staff can also be in there as well. Okay, and then the other thing that we do is we would just double check, because once again, this is quite it is quite a big red button. A lot of people like to press it. Okay, and if you do press this by mistake, you can obviously go back in to end the meeting. Okay, but the other thing that we would always do is we would go back to our team, and wherever that meet now button has come, if it still has the join button, okay, up here, as a teacher, I would simply delete the message, and it just means that that join button is no longer there. Now, that, to be honest with you, if you end the call right, is not there, but it's just another safeguarding thing in place, another step to make sure that pupils cannot access that meeting. And that's quite a nice little thing just that we've started to, we do throughout Ribblesdale, to ensure that there's two ways. So first of all, if staff do forget to press it, they might remember to end the call that way, and that means all students will no longer be a part of that meeting. Okay, and before we do that, I did forget one thing. Okay, bear with me. So if I just go, okay, back to this part. Okay, one thing that we always do is to get the register. Okay, so anybody who attends the meeting, we can download the register. So to download this register, okay, all we do is we press show participants, and then up here at the top, okay, you will see that we've got a download attendance list. And what this basically does, this gives you a list of anybody who's attended at the times they've attended, at the times that they've left, and that just allows you to basically cross-check maybe from the students who've said they were going to attend to see if they have attended. Now, just a reminder about this. This has to be pressed during the meeting, and I would say at the very, very end of the meeting, because if you forget to do it, okay, and then you go back in, you can no longer download it, or you will only get yourself as a participant that shows up on that list. So you need to make sure that you press that download button to get the attendee, and then that at least allows you once again to keep a record of all of those people that have actually been a part of your live lesson. And I think that's really comes to the end on how we do it at Ribblesdale when we do these live lessons that we do. And if we have any questions, okay, please post them or please raise your hand. And at this moment in time, I'll pass back to Paul, who will give you a last couple of minutes of the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lee. That's fantastic for taking us through that. And I'm sure there's some things in there that people weren't aware of that you could do and not do within Teams, but it's very much about the procedure. And as Lee was outlining there about, you know, ending the meeting for everyone at the end and removing that. I think the thing that Lee called out about, you know, we'll come to tendencies soon around pupils actually being sat in a lobby like you were when you probably joined this meeting is it a lot easier for us to manage, but at the moment that feature's not out with all Office 365 tenancies. The only other thing I just wanted to call out before I hand you over to Erica, who's just going to give us a bit of a sort of a summary of what we've seen so far, is that there's also something called a live Teams event as well, and if you want absolute control and want to do lecture style delivery, then maybe a live Teams event is the way forward, because the students have a lot less control over what they can do within that, and it was very much lecture style, so that might be something you want to have a look at. I've noticed Ursula's currently got a hand up. What I'll do, Ursula, is we'll do the questions in 3 or 4 minutes at the end, if that's okay, but we will come to you. So I'm going to hand you over now to Erica. And what Erica's going to do is she's going to give us a quick run through of what you know, the key points to consider when you're thinking about sort of setting up this synchronous live events type teaching. So thank you very much, Erica.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, as Paul just mentioned, we're just going to go through the summary of what we think are the real key points when setting up and running that synchronous live learning. And as my colleagues Paul, Michael and Lee have mentioned, it is about following your existing protocols and procedures in school, as you would if you were in school. So really, I think what we discussed as a team today was giving SLT a copy of your live lessons, especially now. I think probably a lot of staff are getting more comfortable with doing those live lessons, so that you don't really want to be having any clashes, and also that you've got someone from SLT should there be any concerns after the live event. Check all your content and web links are appropriate in advance. As Michael mentioned, close any links that you might have open on your own screen. Remove any learners who are being disruptive or inappropriate. When setting up the lesson, I know Lee has mentioned about, and Michael also touched on, setting up your settings so that students can't message with each other during the session, and setting them all to mute until the end. And Lee will verify that absolutely ending the session and being the last to leave, I've fallen victim to this myself, of hanging up the call because it's tempting to press that red button, but actually stopping the whole lesson and being the last to leave. And if anything does kind of concern you, raise those concerns with your designated safeguarding lead as soon as possible and follow your school's safeguarding procedures as you would normally. And as Paul's just mentioned, we will have time for questions in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Erica, for that. I appreciate that. So there's another couple of questions come back, and we'll sort that in a minute. But just to sort of bring everything together and finish off, there's a lot to consider. Obviously, this webinar has been focusing on very much on keeping children safe and the safeguarding perspective. But I think the sort of the next steps, please go away and review the procedures you've got in place. You know, things like the acceptable use policy and other documents, make sure that they are up to date and they cover everything that you would like to do in terms of remote teaching and learning. But you do not need anything additional. Please make it an integral part of what you've got. I think review the procedures you've got in terms of generally keeping students safe as well, and obviously stress to your staff that the normal procedures apply. And I think live or not live, that is a question, and it depends on what you want. A live lesson isn't absolutely the solution in all cases, and I think sometimes pre-recorded asynchronous delivery can be the better option. So you need to think about that. But I do think there's more and more pressure on schools and on teachers from parents and maybe some senior leaders in education to do synchronous live lesson delivery. But just consider, is that the best way, and is that going to do the best for my students, my young people that are with me? And if you do want any further support from us, then please register for further support by the EdTech Demonstrator project. We are here to help in whatever it may be, and you know, feel free to reach out in whatever you may need. So I think that's essentially it, and I think we will at this stage go to questions, and I know there are a couple up, and I know Ursula had a question initially. So Ursula, do you want to come off mute and ask your question, please? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, it was a specific question about the use of PIN in Microsoft Teams, because I don't know how that works, please.
Yeah, so essentially the PIN is there to allow only certain people to access the meeting or the event. I think particularly with the lobby situation coming out to tenancies imminently, I know that's rolled out in the States, and we've been told that it's coming to the UK now, so it's being rolled out to tenancies. I think that gets around the issue in terms of kids getting into the event, or anyone getting into that event without you wanting them in there. So I think a lot of the issues, and I know Lee demonstrated about how to remove the original live lesson link at the end of one of his last things he did, and that's a procedure you have to go through at the moment to ensure they can't rejoin. And I think, Ursula, there was another question I think was asked by somebody else around ensuring students can't join, particularly after the event. And I think that if you delete that event, as Lee showed us at the moment, then they can't rejoin. But the lobby situation will solve all those problems in the fact that they will not be able to get back in once you've ended that event. So if you end the live lesson using not the red button, but the end call, as Lee showed you from the 3 dots, then that will mean even if the students try to get back in again, they will be held in the lobby and will not be able to re-enter. So I think that makes things a lot more consistent in terms of, and a lot tighter in terms of safety for our students, and students not being in areas of teams and in meetings where they shouldn't be. I hope that answers the question.
Can I just ask something else quickly?
Of course.
Quite. You see, when we go back to college, I will be doing some live lessons at the same time as Teams. That's our current plan as a college. And I'm a physics teacher, and I want to demonstrate a practical, and I want one of my students to be able to film what I'm doing, so that what they see on the screen can be shared with the people who are remote. And I thought the PIN feature would do that, but maybe that's incorrect then.
I think what we'll do, Ursula, is we'll have a look into that and come back to you on your own, if that's okay. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry, I do think I know what you're referring to there, Ursula. Is that the pin on the Microsoft Teams meeting, the little pin?
Yes, where you have for each individual student, you can
yes,
you can pin them, and I wasn't sure if that would make their screen be bigger for the.
It does. Sorry,
yeah, it does, Ursula. But from what I currently understand of it, it only makes it bigger for that one person who's pinned it. But that might be I might be incorrect there, okay, because I've only used it once. But if that is the case, then the people who are watching it, you could get them to pin the one that you are showing.
Okay, what about, so then would the remote students see it larger?
Yes.
I mean, that's what, yes.
Yes.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
No problem. Thank you, Ursula. Are there any other people that would like to ask a question at this time? Sorry,
I
Lee.
see a question from Damien about if you kick a pupil out of a lesson.
Yeah, I think I've just done that one, Lee. Yeah, he was essentially, at the moment, we've got to do what you described in terms of ending that live the meeting and deleting it from as a post in the chat, the conversation.
Sorry, Paul. I do think that what Damien is referring to there is by if I kick a individual pupil out of a meeting because of their behaviour.
Ah, right. Okay. So at the moment, they will be able to come back in because they are on your tenancy. When the lobby comes into play, they will then sit in the lobby. So until the lobby comes into play, yes, they will be able to return into the meeting. But as I said, that's imminent in terms of rollout on UK 365 tenancies. Once that comes into play, they will come into the lobby, and until you admit them as a teacher or the meeting organizer, they will not be able to re-enter. And this is something that, you know, ourselves and numerous schools and colleges have been putting pressure on Microsoft to have this feature about students not being able to re-enter unless you admit them. Sorry for the confusion there. I hope that answers the question. Are there any other questions? I don't think there are any more in the conversation, are there, Lee?
No more on the conversation at this moment, Paul.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, can I just say a big thank you for listening this afternoon. Hopefully being displayed on your screens now are our contacts in terms of our Twitter details. Obviously, you've got Lee's contact details as well. And if you want any further information about what we're doing as a demonstrator consortium, please refer to the link at the top of the screen at the moment. That's the edtech.ribblesdale.org link. So thank you very much for attending, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Thanks very much.